I placed my homemade pumpkin pie with maple whipped cream carefully on the dining table. The cinnamon-scented steam still rose from the perfectly golden crust, my signature recipe that had won the county fair blue ribbon 3 years in a row before Robert passed. My daughter Stephanie was arranging silverware, her movements quick and precise, lips pressed into a thin line of concentration. "Mom," she said without looking up, "we've set up a separate table for your pie. The guests are on special diets, so we'll serve yours later." I glanced at the main dessert table, where Eleanor's store-bought pecan pie sat prominently in the center. Eleanor, my son-in-law's mother, who had arrived an hour ago with her nose in the air and comments about my quaint autumn sweater. The same Eleanor who had never cooked a Thanksgiving meal in her life. "Later?" I asked, my voice steady despite the slight tremor in my hands. Stephanie finally looked up, impatience flashing across her face. "Yes, later. We've got everything planned out. Can you just put it over there?" She nodded toward a small side table near the kitchen door. I stood there, my pie still warm in my hands, and felt something shift inside me. Not anger, not even sadness. Something deeper. A recognition. After decades of Thanksgiving dinners, after raising Stephanie on my own after Robert's heart attack 15 years ago, after moving in with her family 3 years back when she insisted I couldn't manage alone, I had become an afterthought in my own family. I looked at my pie again, remembering the care I'd taken with the crust, the hours spent preparing it just right. Then, without a word, I turned around, walked to the coat rack, slipped my beige cardigan over my shoulders, and headed for the front door, pie still in hand. "Mom? Where are you going?" Stephanie called, confusion rather than concern in her voice. I didn't answer. I stepped outside into the crisp November air, closed the door behind me, and walked to my old Buick that I rarely drove anymore, since Stephanie had convinced me it wasn't safe for someone my age. The key still worked. The engine started on the first try, as if it had been waiting for me. The drive home took only 12 minutes, though it had been months since I'd made the journey. My little house stood just as I had left it, though the yard needed attention and the paint was peeling around the windows. Inside, I was greeted by silence and the faint smell of disuse. I placed the pie on my kitchen counter and cut myself a generous slice. Sitting at my small dining table by the window, I took the first bite. It was delicious, perfect, even. And for the first time in years, I tasted every single bite. I didn't know it then, but that slice of pie was the first step toward reclaiming the woman I used to be. The woman who had been slowly disappearing, one small dismissal at a time. The house felt empty but familiar, like an old friend I hadn't visited in too long. I walked through each room, running my fingers over the furniture draped with sheets, the photo frames I'd left behind. Everything was covered in a fine layer of dust, the physical evidence of my absence. I had only been staying at Stephanie's for 3 years, but it felt like a lifetime ago that this place had truly been mine. I remember the day Stephanie convinced me to move in with her family. It was shortly after my 72nd birthday, and I had slipped on some ice, resulting in a mild sprain. Nothing serious, but Stephanie had acted as if I'd broken every bone in my body. "Mom, this is a sign," she had said, her voice taking on that tone, the one that mixed concern with condescension. "You shouldn't be living alone at your age. What if something worse happens next time?" I had protested, of course. My house was paid off. I had friends in the neighborhood, a garden I tended daily, and a routine that kept me happy and independent. But Stephanie was persistent. She brought up my failing eyesight. I just needed new reading glasses. My forgetfulness. I'd missed one doctor's appointment in 3 years. And how lonely I must be. I had a more active social life than she did. Eventually, I gave in. Not because I thought she was right, but because I was tired of arguing, tired of being treated like a problem that needed solving rather than a person with her own thoughts and desires. "We'll rent out your house," Stephanie had said. "The income will help with your expenses, and you'll have your own room at our place. The kids would love having Grandma around." It sounded reasonable at the time. Practical, even. That's how they get you, though. with practicality disguised as love. At first, living with Stephanie's family had its moments. I enjoyed seeing my grandchildren, Jake and Emma, every day. I helped with homework, told them stories about their grandfather, and snuck them extra cookies when Stephanie wasn't looking. But slowly, things changed. It started with small comments. Mom, you're spoiling them. Or Mom, please don't give them sweets before dinner. Then came the instructions, which clothes were appropriate for me to wear, which TV shows were too exciting before bedtime, which of my recipes used too much butter. My presence at their home shifted from welcomed guest to tolerated burden. I was expected to help with chores, but criticized for doing them wrong. I was invited to family outings, but told to wait in the car if the walking was too strenuous. I was consulted about family decisions, but then ignored when my opinion differed from Stephanie's. And now, on Thanksgiving of all days, I had been told my blue ribbon made with love pie wasn't good enough for the main table, that I would eat later, after everyone else. As I sat in my dusty dining room, savoring the last bite of my pie, I realized something that sent a chill through me. I hadn't heard from Stephanie since I left. No calls, no texts asking if I was okay. It had been 3 hours, and my own daughter hadn't bothered to check if I'd made it home safely. I looked out the window at the fading afternoon light and wondered, when had I become so invisible? And more importantly, what was I going to do about it? My phone finally rang around 7 that evening. I watched Stephanie's name flash on the screen, letting it ring 4 times before answering. Mom? Her voice was tight. Where are you? I'm home, I said simply. Home? You mean your old house? Why would you go there? It's Thanksgiving. I didn't respond immediately. In the background, I could hear voices and laughter, the clinking of glasses. The celebration had continued without a hitch. Mom, are you still there? This is ridiculous. Alan can come pick you up. Ellen, my son-in-law, who treated me with the detached politeness one might show a distant acquaintance. No, thank you, I said. I'm staying here tonight. What? You can't. There's no food. The heat probably isn't even on. I have pie, I interrupted. And the thermostat works just fine. There was a pause. Then Stephanie's voice dropped to that half-whisper she used when she thought she was being patient with me. Mom, I know you're upset about the pie, but it wasn't personal. Eleanor's guests have dietary restrictions. And it wasn't about the pie, Stephanie. My voice remained calm, surprising even myself. It was about being told I would eat after everyone else. Like I'm not part of the family anymore. Like I'm the help. That's not what I meant. You're twisting my words. Maybe, but that's how it felt. Another pause, longer this time. Then, with a sigh, fine. Stay there tonight if you need to prove whatever point you're making. We'll talk in the morning when you're being more reasonable. The call ended before I could respond, but it didn't matter. I wasn't looking for her permission or approval. For the first time in years, I was making my own decision. I found sheets in the linen closet that didn't smell too musty and made up the bed in my old room. The mattress felt strange after so long, firmer than the one in Stephanie's guest room that always made my back ache. I lay down staring at the ceiling I had painted myself when Robert and I first bought this house, 45 years ago. There were still faint roller marks if you knew where to look. As I drifted off to sleep, I wondered what Sarah would have thought of all this. My younger daughter, gone now 7 years from cancer, had always been the gentle one, the one who called just to talk, who remembered how I liked my coffee, who never made me feel like a burden. And then there was Olivia, Sarah's daughter, my granddaughter, who was now 21 and away at college. We hadn't spoken much since I moved in with Stephanie, not because we didn't want to, but because Stephanie had a way of intercepting calls, of monopolizing family gatherings, of making sure she was the center of all communication. I missed Olivia's laugh, her curious questions, her way of seeing the world. I missed being seen by her. Tomorrow, I decided as sleep began to claim me, tomorrow, I would call Olivia. I woke at dawn from the deepest sleep I'd had in months. No sound of Stephanie's coffee grinder, No early morning cartoons from the kids. No whispered arguments between Stephanie and Alan about schedules and carpools. Just silence. Beautiful and mine. I padded to the kitchen in my slippers, finding it exactly as I'd left it yesterday. The remainder of the pie sat on the counter, covered with a dish towel. I cut another slice for breakfast. Why not? And made a mental list of what needed to be done. The electricity was still on, since I'd been paying the minimal bill to keep the house maintained while it was rented. The water ran cold at first, but warmed up after a few minutes. My tenants had moved out 2 months ago, and Stephanie had been handling finding new ones. Now I wondered if she had been dragging her feet deliberately, keeping the house empty while collecting my Social Security and pension in an account she had convinced me to give her access to for convenience. The thought sent a spike of unease through me. How much of my life had I handed over without really looking at what I was doing? I was on my second cup of tea when my phone rang again. Stephanie. Mom, this has gone on long enough. Alan is coming to get you in 20 minutes. No, he isn't, I said, surprising myself with my firmness. Excuse me? I'm staying here, Stephanie. For a few days at least. That's absurd. There's no food. The place is probably filthy. And I can go to the grocery store. I can clean. I'm 75, not incapacitated. Her voice hardened. Is this about yesterday? Because I already told you. It's about more than yesterday, I said. It's about me needing some space to think. Think about what? The edge of panic in her voice was new. It made me pause. About what I want, Stephanie. About how I want to live. Silence stretched between us, taut as a wire. When she spoke again, her voice was coldly practical. Fine, I'll bring you some clothes and groceries this afternoon. But this is temporary, Mom. You're being emotional. The call ended, and I sat back in my chair, a strange lightness in my chest. Temporary, maybe. But for now, this dusty, neglected house felt more like home than Stephanie's pristine guest room ever had. I spent the morning cleaning, opening windows to air out the musty smell, wiping down counters, running the vacuum over carpets that had seen better days. Physical work felt good after months of being told I shouldn't strain myself, that I should let others do things for me. My joints ached, but it was a satisfying ache, the kind that reminded me I was still alive, still capable. Around noon, I found my old address book in a drawer and flipped to the Oz. Olivia's cell number was written in my careful script, though I'd added it years ago when she first got her phone. I hesitated only a moment before dialing. Grandma? Her voice, surprised but instantly warm, wrapped around me like a hug. Hello, sweetheart, I said, tears suddenly pricking at my eyes. Is everything okay? Are you at Aunt Stephanie's? Actually, no. I'm at my house, the old one. Your house? Why? The concern in her voice wasn't patronizing like Stephanie's. It was genuine. And so I told her about Thanksgiving, about the pie, about the slow erosion of my independence over the past 3 years. She listened without interrupting, and when I finished, she said something no one had said to me in a very long time. What do you want to do, Grandma? Not what I should do, not what was practical or sensible or appropriate for a woman my age. What I wanted. I think I want to stay here, I said softly. At least for now. Then you should, she said simply. It's your house, your life. Your mother thinks I'm being emotional and unreasonable. Olivia laughed, a sound so like Sarah's it made my heart catch. And she's never emotional or unreasonable. Besides, sometimes emotions are telling us something important. We talked for nearly an hour about her classes, about my house, about her memories of visits before I moved to Stephanie's. Before we hung up, she said, Can I come see you tomorrow? I can skip my afternoon class. I'd love that, I said. But don't skip class. It's just Biology 101 review. Nothing important. Everything's important, I said automatically, then stopped myself. But yes, I'd love to see you. We can have lunch. After we hung up, I sat for a long time, staring at the phone in my hand. The conversation with Olivia had awakened something in me, a sense that I was still a person with value, with thoughts and feelings that mattered. Not just a problem to be managed or a responsibility to be shouldered, but a human being worthy of basic respect. The sound of a car pulling into the driveway broke my reverie. Stephanie had arrived with my things, no doubt ready to continue trying to convince me of my folly. I stood up straighter, squared my shoulders, and went to open the door. Whatever came next, I wouldn't be going back to the way things were. That much I knew for certain. Stephanie's SUV gleamed in the driveway, a stark contrast to my dusty Buick parked beneath the old oak tree. She emerged with 2 grocery bags and a small suitcase, her face set in what I thought of as her dealing with mom expression, a mixture of exasperation and forced patience. "The front yard is a mess," she said by way of greeting. "The neighbors must be thrilled you're back." I didn't rise to the bait. "Thank you for bringing my things." She brushed past me into the house, her eyes critically scanning every surface. "It's worse than I thought. Mom, this place needs serious work before it's livable again." "It's perfectly livable," I said, following her to the kitchen where she began unpacking groceries. "Just needs some TLC." "TLC that you shouldn't have to provide at your age." She arranged cans in the cupboard with unnecessary force. "You could have fallen cleaning those gutters last year. That's why we agreed you'd stay with us. Remember? I didn't fall. But you could have." She turned to face me, arms crossed. "Mom, I know you think I'm controlling or whatever, but I'm just trying to keep you safe." I studied my daughter's face, the familiar crease between her eyebrows, the set of her jaw so like her father's. I'd always thought of Stephanie as the practical one, the responsible one. Sarah had been the dreamer, the one with her head in books and her heart on her sleeve. Stephanie was spreadsheets and 5-year plans and sensible shoes. I'd admired that about her once. "I know you think you're helping," I said carefully. "But Stephanie, there's a difference between helping someone and controlling them." Her face flushed. "I am not controlling. Everything I've done has been for your benefit. Taking care of your finances, making sure you have a comfortable place to live, looking after your health. Did I ask you to do those things?" She blinked, thrown off stride. You, you needed help. Maybe with some things. But you took over everything, Stephanie. My money, my house, my choices about what to wear and what to eat, and when to sleep. I kept my voice gentle but firm. That's not help. That's control." She stared at me as if I'd suddenly started speaking another language. "So this is how you repay me? By storming out on Thanksgiving and hiding in this old house to punish me?" "I'm not punishing you. I'm just remembering who I am." "And who is that?" "A stubborn old woman who would rather live in a dusty, run-down house than accept help from her family." The words stung, but I didn't let it show. "No, a person who deserves to make her own choices, even if those choices aren't what you would choose for me." Stephanie threw up her hands. "Fine, stay here and prove whatever point you're making. But when you fall in the shower or forget to turn off the stove, don't expect me to drop everything and come running." I almost smiled. "I won't." She finished unpacking the groceries in tense silence, then handed me the suitcase. "I brought your medications, some clothes, and your toiletries. The food should last you a few days." "Thank you." She headed for the door, then turned back, her expression softening slightly. "Mom, I do love you. I just want what's best for you." "I know," I said, because I did. Stephanie's version of love had always been practical, expressed through logistics rather than affection. "I love you too, but I need to do this." After she left, I unpacked the suitcase, hanging my clothes in the closet that still held some items I'd left behind. Old sweaters, comfortable pants, shirts that Stephanie had deemed too worn for me to bring to her house. I ran my hands over the familiar fabrics, feeling like I was greeting old friends. As I placed my toothbrush in the bathroom holder, I caught my reflection in the mirror. Gray hair that needed a trim, lines etched deeper around my eyes and mouth, but the same brown eyes that had watched over children, tended gardens, read books, and witnessed both joy and sorrow. Eyes that still had life in them, still had spark. Hello, Martha, I said to my reflection. It's been a while. The next morning, I woke early again, a habit from decades of rising to make Robert's breakfast before he headed to the factory, then getting the girls ready for school. Even after retirement, after Robert's death, after the girls left home, the habit remained. Early mornings had always been my time, the quiet hours before the world made demands. I made coffee in the old percolator I found in the back of a cupboard, the rich aroma filling the kitchen and bringing back a flood of memories. How many mornings had I stood in this very spot, watching the sun rise over the maple trees in the backyard while planning my day? After breakfast, I made a list, not of chores or obligations, but of questions. Questions I'd been avoiding for too long. How much money do I actually have? What is happening with the rental income from this house? 3. Who has access to my accounts? What do I really want at this stage of my life? The first 3 questions required practical action. The fourth would take more reflection. I dressed in comfortable clothes, brushed my hair into a simple bun, and walked out to my car. The drive to Riverdale Community Bank took only 10 minutes. Inside, I was greeted by a young man with a friendly smile. "Good morning," he said. "How can I help you today?" "I'd like to review my accounts, please." I handed him my ID and bank card. His fingers tapped at the keyboard. "Of course, Mrs. Wilson. It looks like you have a checking account, a savings account, and a certificate of deposit with us. Is there a specific account you'd like to discuss?" "All of them, please. And I'd like to know who has access to these accounts besides myself." He looked up, something flickering in his expression. "Let me get that information for you." More typing, then. "It appears your daughter, Stephanie Carter, is listed as a joint account holder on your checking and savings accounts, with full access privileges." I nodded slowly. "And what about online banking? Who has access to that?" "The online banking is registered to an email address." He turned the screen slightly. "scarter-mailnet.com. Is that correct?" Stephanie's email, not mine. I'd never even set up online banking. "Can you print statements for all my accounts for the past year, please? And I'd like to change the access permissions." The young man, Kevin, according to his name tag, looked slightly uncomfortable. "Certainly. Changing access would require some paperwork. May I ask what changes you'd like to make?" "I'd like to remove my daughter from all my accounts and reset the online banking to my control only." Kevin nodded. "I can help you with that. Would you like to speak with a financial advisor as well? Sometimes when making these kinds of changes, it's helpful to review your overall financial picture." "Yes," I said. "I think that would be very helpful." An hour later, I left the bank with a folder full of statements, new online banking credentials, and a clearer picture of my financial situation. What I saw had shocked me. Regular transfers from my accounts to Stephanie's personal account, labeled care expenses, withdrawals for home maintenance, that far exceeded what would be reasonable for basic upkeep of my house. Online purchases I'd never authorized or even seen. I wasn't broke. Robert's pension and our careful saving had left me in decent shape, but thousands of dollars had been siphoned away over the past 3 years, all under the guise of helping me. My hands trembled slightly as I started the car, not from age but from a potent mixture of anger and determination. The next stop was clear. Baxter and Ogilvy, the law firm that had handled our will after Robert died. The receptionist at Baxter and Ogilvy recognized me immediately, though it had been years since my last visit. "Mrs. Wilson, lovely to see you again. Do you have an appointment?" "No, but I was hoping to speak with Mr. Baxter if he's available." "It's rather important." She checked the computer. "He has a cancellation in about 20 minutes. Would that work?" "Perfectly. Thank you." I sat in the waiting area, my bank folder clutched in my lap, and tried to organize my thoughts. What exactly did I want to accomplish? Remove Stephanie's access to my finances. Certainly. Regain control of my house and its rental income. But beyond that, before I could answer, a familiar voice called my name. "Martha, what a wonderful surprise." James Baxter, now in his 60s with silver at his temples, smiled warmly as he approached. We'd known each other for decades. He'd been a young lawyer when Robert and I first came to the firm, and over the years had become something of a friend. James, I stood accepting his brief hug. Thank you for seeing me without an appointment. Of course, come in. He led me to his office, closing the door behind us. It's been too long. How are you? That's a complicated question, I said, settling into the chair across from his desk. I'm in the middle of making some changes, and I need legal advice. His expression grew more serious. I'm listening. I laid out the situation as clearly as I could. My move to Stephanie's 3 years ago, the gradual loss of control over my finances and property, and my recent decision to reclaim my independence. I showed him the bank statements, explained about the rental income, and finally, told him about Thanksgiving and the pie. When I finished, James was quiet for a moment, fingers steepled under his chin. Martha, I have to ask, has Stephanie done anything with your will or power of attorney documents since you moved in with her? A cold feeling settled in my stomach. I'm not sure. She had me sign some papers about a year ago, said they were updates to my medical directives. He nodded. Let me check our records. He turned to his computer, typing quickly. After a moment, he frowned. There's a note here that your file was accessed, and copies were made at Stephanie's request last year, but no new documents have been filed with us. What does that mean? It could mean nothing. Or it could mean that changes were made through another attorney. He leaned forward. Martha, do you remember what exactly you signed? I tried to recall, but the memory was frustratingly vague. There were several pages. Stephanie said it was important for her to be able to make medical decisions for me if necessary. A medical power of attorney would make sense, James said. But I'm concerned that you might have signed a broader, durable power of attorney that gives her control over your financial and legal affairs as well. The cold feeling spread. How can I find out? We'll request copies of all legal documents filed under your name in the county records. In the meantime, I suggest we create new documents that explicitly revoke any previous powers of attorney and create a new will if you wish to make changes there as well. I thought of Olivia, of her kindness yesterday, of how much she reminded me of Sarah. Yes, I said, I do want to make changes to my will. James nodded. We can start that process today. And Martha, he added, his voice gentler, what you're doing, taking back control of your life. It takes courage. I've seen too many clients in your situation who wait until it's too late, until their assets are gone, or their independence is so eroded they can't fight back. It doesn't feel like courage, I admitted, just necessity. Sometimes they're the same thing, he smiled. Now, let's get to work. By the time I left James's office 3 hours later, I had signed papers revoking any existing powers of attorney, initiated the process of creating a new will that would leave my estate primarily to Olivia, and filed a request to see any legal documents that had been created in my name over the past 3 years. James had also recommended a real estate attorney to help me regain full control of my house and its rental income. The sky was darkening as I drove home, winter bringing early nightfall. My mind was full, processing everything I had learned and the steps I had taken. Part of me was terrified. I had just upended the careful arrangement Stephanie had constructed, and I knew she wouldn't take it well. But another part of me, a part that had been silent for too long, felt alive with purpose. As I pulled into the driveway of my house, not Stephanie's, not the tenant's, mine, I noticed a small car parked at the curb. A familiar figure sat on my front steps, hunched against the cold. Olivia. She stood as I got out of the car, her face breaking into a smile that warmed me more than any heater could. Grandma! I was getting worried. I'm sorry, sweetheart. I had some errands that took longer than expected. I hugged her, breathing in the faint scent of her strawberry shampoo. Have you been waiting long? Just about 20 minutes. I tried calling, but it went straight to voicemail. I patted my coat pocket, realizing I'd left my phone on silent after the bank. I'm sorry about that. Come inside, it's freezing out here. Inside, Olivia looked around with curious eyes. It looks different than I remember. Smaller. Maybe? Things often do when we grow up, I said, hanging our coats. Are you hungry? I can make us some sandwiches. I brought food, actually. She held up a paper bag. I hadn't noticed. Thai from that place near campus you always said you wanted to try. My heart swelled. Such a simple thing, remembering a casual comment I'd made who knows how long ago. But it meant everything. We ate at the kitchen table, sharing pad thai and green curry from paper containers, using the mismatched forks Stephanie had brought yesterday. Olivia told me about her classes, her roommate drama, her part-time job at the campus library. I listened, asked questions, laughed at her stories. It felt so normal, so right. So, she said finally, pushing away her empty container, what were these mysterious errands that kept you out all afternoon? I hesitated, then decided on honesty. I went to the bank and my lawyer's office. I'm making some changes, taking back control of a few things. Her eyes widened slightly. Like what? Like my money, my house, my life. I gave her a brief overview of what I'd discovered about Stephanie's management of my affairs. Olivia's expression darkened. That's, that's not right, Grandma. She shouldn't have done that. No, she shouldn't have, I agreed. But I let her. That's on me. Don't blame yourself, Olivia said fiercely. She's your daughter. You trusted her. Yes, and now I'm fixing things. I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. But enough about that. Tell me more about this boy you mentioned, the one from your English class. She blushed and launched into a story about a coffee date gone comically wrong, and we left the heavier topics behind. For the rest of the evening, we were just grandmother and granddaughter, sharing stories and laughter, the way it should be. After Olivia left, promising to return soon, I stood in the doorway watching her taillights disappear down the street. The house felt warmer somehow, more alive after her visit. I walked through the rooms slowly, touching furniture, straightening pictures, reacquainting myself with this space that had been mine for so long. In the bedroom, I opened the closet and pulled out a box I'd noticed earlier. Inside were photo albums I'd left behind when I moved to Stephanie's. Too bulky, she'd said. Too much clutter. I sat on the bed and opened the first one, running my fingers over images of a younger me, of Robert with his broad smile, of Stephanie and Sarah as little girls with gap-toothed grins. One photo caught my eye. Me at about 50, standing in the garden with dirt on my knees and a trowel in my hand, laughing at something off camera. I remembered that day. Robert had been teasing me about my war against the Japanese beetles that were attacking my roses. I looked happy, confident, strong. That woman was still inside me. Older now, a little more worn, but still there. My phone buzzed with a text. Stephanie, what were you doing at the bank today? Kevin called asking if you got home okay. I stared at the message, a chill running through me. How quickly word traveled in a small town. How quickly Stephanie had found out about my visit. I typed back, taking care of some business. I'm fine. Her response came immediately. What business? What are you doing, Mom? I didn't answer. Instead, I turned off the phone, set it on the nightstand, and went back to my photo albums. Stephanie's questions could wait until morning. Tonight belonged to memories, to rediscovery, to the quiet joy of being alone without being lonely. As I drifted off to sleep later, the photo of me in the garden clear in my mind, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: anticipation. Not anxiety about what Stephanie would say or do, not resignation to whatever plans others had made for me, but genuine anticipation for what tomorrow might bring. A tomorrow that for the first time in too long was mine to shape. I woke to pounding on my front door. The bedside clock read 7:15 a.m. The pounding continued, insistent and angry. Throwing on my robe, I made my way to the door, not surprised to find Stephanie on my porch, her face flushed with anger despite the morning chill.
What are you doing?
She demanded as soon as I opened the door. The bank called me yesterday saying you were removing me from your accounts. And now I find out you've been to see James Baxter?
Mom,
Have you lost your mind? I stepped back, gesturing for her to come inside. No sense having this conversation where the neighbors could hear. I haven't lost anything, Stephanie. Least of all my mind. She stormed in, unwinding her scarf with jerky movements, then explained to me why you're suddenly making all these drastic changes without even talking to me first. Because they're my accounts. My house. My life. I moved to the kitchen, putting on the kettle. Morning confrontations required tea. Would you like some breakfast? I made banana bread yesterday. I don't want banana bread. Her voice rose. I want an explanation. Do you have any idea how this makes me look? The bank thinks I've been stealing from you or something. I turned to face her, keeping my voice calm. Haven't you? She recoiled as if I'd slapped her. How can you say that? Everything I've done has been to take care of you. Taking care of me doesn't require taking control of my money, Stephanie. It doesn't require making me feel like a guest in your home, or telling me when I can eat, or treating me like I'm incompetent. I never, she started, then stopped.
you're twisting everything.
I've sacrificed so much for you, changed our entire lives to accommodate you. And this is the thanks I get. The kettle whistled. I turned to pour hot water over the tea bags, giving myself a moment to collect my thoughts. When I turned back, Stephanie was pacing the small kitchen, reminding me of how she'd walked the same path as a teenager, angry about curfews or boys. I turned back. Stephanie was pacing the small kitchen, reminding me of how she'd walked the same path as a teenager, angry about curfews or boys I wouldn't let her date. You know, I said, setting a mug of tea on the table, I'm not undoing everything. I'm just reclaiming what's mine. What does that even mean? She stopped pacing to face me. Are you moving back here permanently, cutting me out of your life? Is this some kind of punishment for the stupid pie? I sat down, gesturing for her to do the same. After a moment's hesitation, she did, though she left the tea untouched. This isn't about punishment, I said gently. It's about boundaries. For 3 years, I've lived in your house by your rules. I've watched you take over my finances, make decisions about my property, even choose what clothes I should wear and when I should go to bed. That's not helping me, Stephanie. That's controlling me. I was trying to make things easier for you. Her voice rose again. Do you have any idea how much work it is, caring for an aging parent? The worry, the responsibility. I never asked you to take on that responsibility, I pointed out. You insisted, and then you turned it into a burden. She flinched. That's not fair. Isn't it? When was the last time you asked what I wanted instead of telling me what I needed? When was the last time you treated me like your mother instead of your dependent? Tears welled in her eyes, but there was anger behind them. So that's it? You're just done with me? With us? No, I said, softening my tone. I still love you, Stephanie. You're my daughter, but I need to live my own life again, make my own choices, and you need to respect that. She wiped her eyes roughly. And what about all the legal stuff? The bank? Were you even going to tell me about that? Yes. Once it was done, I'm changing my will and revoking the power of attorney you had me sign last year. Her face paled. You're changing your will? To what? I hesitated, then decided honesty was best. I'm leaving most of my estate to Olivia. Olivia? Disbelief colored her voice. Mom, she's barely an adult. And what about Jake and Emma? Your own grandchildren. I've set up trusts for their education. But the house, the main accounts, those will go to Olivia. Stephanie stood abruptly, the chair scraping against the linoleum. This is insane. You're punishing me through my children now. All because of one comment about a pie? This isn't about the pie, I said again, remaining seated. It's about years of small dismissals, of being treated like I'm incompetent or burdensome. The pie was just the moment I finally saw it clearly. She shook her head, already reaching for her coat. I can't believe this. After everything I've done for you, this is how you repay me. Stephanie. No, she cut me off. You want independence? Fine, be independent. But don't expect me to stand by and watch you throw away everything we've built because you're having some kind of senior rebellion." She stormed out, the front door slamming behind her. I sat at the table, my tea cooling, and felt a curious mixture of sadness and relief. I hadn't wanted a confrontation, but perhaps it had been inevitable. The wound needed to be lanced before any healing could begin. I sipped my tea and wondered what would come next. Stephanie wouldn't give up control easily. That wasn't in her nature. There would be more arguments, more accusations, perhaps even attempts to prove I was incompetent or making bad decisions. But for the first time in years, I felt ready to stand my ground, not with anger or bitterness, but with a quiet certainty that I deserved better than what I'd settled for, that loving my daughter didn't mean surrendering my dignity. Outside, the winter sun broke through the clouds, casting long shadows across my kitchen floor. I finished my tea, washed the mug, and headed upstairs to dress. There was still much to do: calls to make, appointments to keep, a life to reclaim one piece at a time. And if Stephanie couldn't understand that now, perhaps someday she would. In the meantime, I had a banana bread to finish and a lunch to prepare for Olivia's next visit. Small pleasures, but mine to enjoy on my own terms. The next few days passed in a flurry of activity. I met with a real estate attorney who helped me terminate the rental management agreement. Stephanie had established and set up a new one directly under my control. I visited the house I'd been renting out, shocked to find it in worse condition than I'd expected. The beautiful hardwood floors I'd lovingly maintained were scratched and stained. The garden I'd tended for decades was now just patchy grass and weeds. "We can file for damages against the previous tenants," the attorney advised. But I shook my head. "No, I just want to move forward." "How soon can I terminate their lease?" "They're already gone," he said, checking his notes. "According to this, they moved out 2 months ago. The property has been vacant since then." 2 months. Money from a non-existent tenant had still been flowing into the account. Stephanie managed. The revelation should have angered me, but instead it just confirmed what I already knew. Reclaiming my independence wasn't an overreaction, but a necessity. I spent mornings cleaning the house, making it truly mine again. Olivia came by most afternoons, sometimes helping, sometimes just keeping me company. We fell into an easy rhythm together, rediscovering our relationship without Stephanie's looming presence. "You know Aunt Stephanie is furious, right?" Olivia said one afternoon as we sorted through old books, deciding which to keep and which to donate. "I imagine she is," I replied, running my fingers over the worn spine of Robert's favorite mystery novel. "Has she spoken to you about it?" Olivia snorted. "She called me yesterday, all concerned about your mental state and how I shouldn't encourage you. Said you were making rash decisions and needed family support, not enablement." I looked up sharply. "What did you tell her?" A mischievous smile spread across her face. "I told her that from where I'm standing, you seem more mentally clear than you have in years, and that maybe she should consider why her own mother had to escape her house with a pie to feel human again." I couldn't help laughing. "Oh, I bet that went over well." "She hung up on me," Olivia admitted. "But Grandma, I meant it. You're different now, stronger, more present." I nodded, setting the book in the keep pile. "I feel more present. It's like I've been living behind glass, watching my life happen, but not really participating in it. Now the glass is gone." "I'm proud of you," she said simply. "Mom would be too." The mention of Sarah brought a bittersweet ache. She would have never let things get this far. She always saw me, really saw me. "She taught me how," Olivia said softly. "She used to say that listening wasn't just about hearing words, but about recognizing the person speaking them." Tears pricked at my eyes. That sounds like her. We worked in companionable silence for a while, the afternoon sun slanting through dusty windows, painting golden rectangles on the faded carpet. I thought about Sarah, about the different ways my two daughters had expressed love. Sarah, with her quiet attention, her genuine interest in my thoughts and feelings. Stephanie, with her efficiency, her practical solutions, her determined efforts to fix whatever she perceived as broken, including eventually me. I had loved them both. Still did. But somewhere along the way, Stephanie's version of love had become a cage rather than a support. Perhaps she'd never intended it that way, but intention and impact were different things. I was only now beginning to understand how much I'd lost by surrendering to her management, not just control of my finances or my house, but my very sense of self. The doorbell rang, interrupting my thoughts. Olivia looked at me questioningly. I shrugged. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened the door, I found Alan, my son-in-law, standing awkwardly on the porch, hands shoved in his coat pockets. "Martha," he said, nodding stiffly. "May I come in?" I hesitated, then stepped aside. Alan had always been Stephanie's ally in all things. His presence couldn't mean anything good. He entered, noticing Olivia in the living room with obvious surprise. "Oh, I didn't realize you had company." "Olivia's not company, she's family," I said. "Would you like some coffee?" "No, thanks. This won't take long." He cleared his throat. "Stephanie sent me to talk some sense into you." I almost smiled at his bluntness. Alan had never been one for subtlety. Did she now? And what sense would that be? He looked uncomfortable. "Look, Martha, I know you and Stephanie have had a disagreement. But these changes you're making, they're pretty extreme, don't you think? Cutting her off from your accounts, changing your will, refusing to come home." "This is my home," I said firmly. He glanced around, taking in the half-unpacked boxes, the piles of books, the general disarray of my reclamation project. "It's not exactly suitable. The place needs work. And you—" "I'm what, Alan? Too old? Too frail?" I kept my voice level. "I managed this house for 40 years before moving in with you and Stephanie. I think I can handle it now." He shifted his weight, clearly uncomfortable. "It's not just about the house. Stephanie's worried about your decision-making. These sudden, drastic changes, they aren't sudden to me," I said. "They're the result of 3 years of gradually losing my autonomy until I finally reached a breaking point." Olivia had moved to stand beside me, a silent show of support. Alan's eyes flicked between us, his frown deepening. "I see she's gotten to you too," he said to Olivia. "Nobody's gotten to me," Olivia replied coolly. "I just happen to believe that Grandma deserves to make her own choices." Alan sighed, running a hand through his thinning hair. "Martha, Stephanie's talking about getting a cognitive assessment done. She thinks these decisions might be a sign of diminished capacity." The words hung in the air like a threat. I felt Olivia stiffen beside me, but I remained calm. I'd been expecting something like this. "By all means," I said. "I'll happily undergo any assessment." In fact, James Baxter suggested the same thing, to protect my new legal documents from exactly this kind of challenge. "I have an appointment with a geriatric specialist next week." Surprise flickered across Alan's face. Clearly, he hadn't expected me to be one step ahead. "I'm not having some kind of mental break, Alan," I continued. "I'm finally thinking clearly after years of allowing Stephanie to make me doubt myself. And I suspect you know that." He looked away, unable to meet my eyes. There was a long silence, broken only by the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway, another old friend Stephanie had deemed too old-fashioned for her modern home. Finally, Alan spoke, his voice quieter now. "She's really upset, Martha. I've never seen her like this. She feels betrayed." "I understand that," I said gently. "And I'm sorry she's hurting, but this isn't about hurting Stephanie, it's about healing myself." He nodded slowly, as if something was finally clicking into place. "I'll tell her. I'll tell her you're doing okay. That maybe she should give you some space." "Thank you." He turned to leave, then paused at the door. "For what it's worth, I always told her she was being too hands-on with you. But you know Stephanie, once she decides something is for the best, there's no changing her mind." With that surprising admission, he left, the door closing softly behind him. Olivia and I looked at each other, processing what had just happened. "Well," she said finally. That was unexpected. The visit or his semi-confession at the end? Both. She smiled wryly. I've never heard Uncle Alan disagree with Aunt Stephanie about anything. I returned to the living room, sinking into my old armchair. Another piece Stephanie had deemed unworthy of moving to her house. People can surprise you. Do you think they'll really try to get you declared incompetent or something? I considered the question. Stephanie might want to, but I don't think she'll get far. The assessment will show I'm perfectly capable, and James has made sure all the legal documents are ironclad. Olivia sat on the couch across from me, tucking her feet under her like she used to do as a child. Still, it's pretty awful that she'd even consider it. She's desperate, I said, feeling a strange compassion despite everything. Control is Stephanie's security blanket. When she can't control a situation, she panics. That doesn't excuse how she's treated you. No, it doesn't. But it helps me understand it. I leaned back in the chair, feeling the familiar contours cradle me. Your mother, Sarah, once told me something I've never forgotten. She said, people can only love you in the way they know how to love. Stephanie's way has always been through management, through fixing, through arranging things just so. The problem is, I'm not a thing to be arranged. Olivia smiled softly. Mom was pretty wise. She was. I reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. And so are you, my dear. So are you. We spent the rest of the afternoon finishing our sorting project, the shadow of Alan's visit gradually receding as we worked and talked and remembered together. By the time Olivia left for her evening class, the living room looked almost normal again. Books arranged on shelves, old magazines recycled, knickknacks dusted and displayed. After she left, I wandered through the house, touching familiar objects, reacquainting myself with corners and creaks. The place wasn't perfect. It needed painting. The carpet was worn, the kitchen dated. But it was mine. Every scratch on the woodwork, every faded patch of wallpaper, every squeaky floorboard told a story. My story. Our story. I stopped at the mantel, picking up a photo of Robert I'd found in one of the boxes. His smile, his kind eyes, the slight tilt of his head, all so familiar, yet somehow new again after being tucked away for so long. What would you think of all this, old man? I asked his image. Your stubborn wife, making waves at 75. I could almost hear his chuckle, feel his hand on my shoulder. He'd always encouraged my independence, even when cultural norms suggested wives should defer to husbands. You've got fire, Martha, he used to say. Never let anyone put it out. Somewhere along the way, I'd allowed that fire to dwindle to embers, not just after his death, but gradually, as I aged, as society's view of me shifted from woman to elderly woman, as Stephanie's well-meaning control tightened like a vine around a tree. But embers can reignite. All they need is a little oxygen, a little freedom to burn. I placed Robert's photo back on the mantel and headed to the kitchen. Tonight, I would make myself a proper dinner. Not the bland, low-sodium meals Stephanie insisted were appropriate for my age, but something with flavor, with spice. Maybe the curry Olivia had introduced me to, or perhaps Robert's favorite spaghetti carbonara. The choice was mine. Every choice was mine again. And that realization, more than anything else, made this old house feel truly like home. The geriatric specialist, Dr. Patel, was a petite woman, with kind eyes and a no-nonsense manner that I appreciated immediately. Mrs. Wilson, she said, reviewing the paperwork I'd brought. I understand you're here for a cognitive assessment. Yes, I explained the situation. My decision to move back to my own home. Stephanie's concerns about my mental capacity, the legal implications. Dr. Patel listened attentively, occasionally making note. This happens more often than you might think, she said when I finished. Adult children become accustomed to making decisions for their aging parents, sometimes before it's truly necessary. Then when the parent asserts independence, it creates conflict. That's exactly it, I said, relieved to be understood. I don't think Stephanie means harm, but she's gone too far. Dr. Patel nodded. Let's do a thorough assessment so you have documentation either way. We'll test memory, reasoning, judgment, spatial awareness, all the cognitive functions that would affect your ability to make sound decisions. The tests took nearly 2 hours. Some were straightforward, remembering sequences of numbers, identifying patterns, answering questions about current events. Others were more subtle, involving ethical scenarios or financial judgment calls. Throughout it all, Dr. Patel remained professional but warm, never making me feel as though my competence was truly in question. At the end, she reviewed her notes before meeting my eyes with a smile. Mrs. Wilson, I'm pleased to tell you that you show no signs of cognitive impairment whatsoever. Your scores are actually above average for your age group in several categories, particularly verbal reasoning and financial judgment. I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. Not that I doubted my own mind, but having professional confirmation was reassuring. I'll prepare a formal report for your records, she continued. You might want to share it with your attorney, given the circumstances. Thank you, Dr. Patel. That would be very helpful. She hesitated, then added, May I offer some personal advice? Of course. What you're doing, reclaiming your independence, it's important not just for you, but for many older adults who face similar challenges. Too often, our society equates aging with decline, with incompetence. We strip seniors of their autonomy for their own good, not realizing the harm it does. I nodded, thinking of the countless small ways my agency had been eroded over the past few years. The car keys quietly disappearing, the decisions made without my input, the medical appointments scheduled without my knowledge. At the same time, Dr. Patel continued, try to remember that your daughter's behavior, misguided as it is, likely comes from a place of love and genuine concern. I know, I said softly. That's what makes it so complicated. Family usually is, she smiled. But setting healthy boundaries doesn't mean cutting ties. It means creating a relationship where both parties can maintain their dignity and independence. I left Dr. Patel's office with the promised report and a renewed sense of purpose. The document confirmed what I already knew. I was perfectly capable of managing my own affairs, but it also offered something more valuable, validation. An expert had listened to my story, evaluated my mind, and concluded that my desire for autonomy was reasonable, healthy, and right. As I drove home, I found myself thinking about Dr. Patel's parting words about boundaries and dignity. Could Stephanie and I find a new balance? A way to be mother and daughter without the unhealthy dynamic that had developed. I wanted to believe it was possible, even if the path there wouldn't be easy. When I pulled into my driveway, I was surprised to see Jake, my 16-year-old grandson, sitting on the front steps. His lanky frame was hunched against the cold, hands stuffed into the pockets of a jacket that was too light for the weather. Jake? I called, hurrying from the car. What are you doing here? Is everything okay? He looked up, his face a mixture of relief and nervousness. Grandma. Hi. Yeah, everything's fine, I guess. I just wanted to see you. Does your mother know you're here? He shook his head. I came after school. Told her I was going to study at Zach's house. I sighed, unlocking the door. Come inside before you freeze. I'll make hot chocolate. In the kitchen, Jake perched awkwardly on a stool while I heated milk on the stove. He looked around with curious eyes, taking in the changes I'd made over the past week. New curtains, rearranged furniture, fresh flowers on the table. The place looks good, he offered. Different than I remember. It's getting there. I sprinkled cinnamon into the simmering milk. Now want to tell me why you're sneaking around to see your old grandma? He fidgeted, long fingers tapping against the countertop. Mom's been intense lately. Talking about you all the time, saying you're not thinking clearly, that you need help but won't accept it. I poured the hot chocolate into mugs, adding a dollop of whipped cream to his. And what do you think? He accepted the mug gratefully, wrapping his hands around it for warmth. I think, I think you seem fine. Better than fine, actually. You look happier than you did at our house. The simple observation, delivered with teenage bluntness, touched me deeply. I am happier, Jake. Not because I don't love you all, but because I need my own space, my own life. He nodded, sipping his drink. That's what I figured. Mom doesn't get it, though. She's like obsessed with getting you to come back. She and Dad argue about it all the time now. That gave me pause. They're arguing? Yeah. Dad thinks she should back off, let you do your thing. Mom says he doesn't understand what's at stake. He rolled his eyes. Whatever that means. I thought of Alan's visit, his parting comment about having told Stephanie she was too hands-on with me. Perhaps there was more discord in their household than I'd realized. I'm sorry they're arguing, I said. That's not what I wanted. Jake shrugged. It's not your fault. Mom's always been super controlling. Even with me and Emma, it's like if things aren't exactly how she wants them, she freaks. Out of the mouths of babes. I hid a smile behind my mug. Your mother means well, Jake. She wants to protect the people she loves. I know, but there's a difference between protecting someone and suffocating them. He glanced up, suddenly self-conscious. At least, that's what my counselor says. Your counselor is wise, I said, intrigued by this new information. I didn't know you were seeing one. Yeah, for like a year now, for anxiety and stuff. He stared into his mug. Mom didn't want me to tell you. Said you'd worry. Another decision made for me, another piece of information filtered through Stephanie's judgment of what I could handle. The pattern was so clear now that I could see it from a distance. Well, I'm glad you told me now, I said. And I'm proud of you for getting help when you need it. That takes courage. He smiled, a flicker of the little boy I remembered in his teenage features. Thanks, Grandma. We talked for another hour about school, his friends, his interest in photography that Stephanie deemed impractical compared to more traditional career paths. I listened without judgment, offering support but not direction, respect but not control, all the things I wished Stephanie could give both him and me. When it was time for him to leave, I hugged him tightly. You're welcome here anytime, Jake, but please don't lie to your mother about where you're going. That just creates more problems. He nodded reluctantly. I'll tell her I came to see you. Maybe, maybe I could come by regularly, like officially. I'd like that very much. After he left, I sat at the kitchen table, turning my empty mug between my hands, thinking about the ripples my decision had created, not just in my life, but in Stephanie's marriage, in Jake's understanding of family dynamics, in the entire ecosystem of relationships that made up our family. Change was never isolated, never contained. It spread like water, finding every crack and crevice, reshaping the landscape in ways you couldn't always predict. I hadn't set out to disrupt so many lives when I walked out with that Thanksgiving pie, but disruption sometimes led to growth, to new and healthier patterns. At least, that's what I hoped was happening here. Not just a breaking, but a rebuilding. A chance for all of us to relate to each other with more honesty, more respect, and ultimately more love. My phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. Stephanie's name flashed on the screen. I took a deep breath and answered. Hello, Stephanie. Jake just got home, she said without preamble, her voice tight. He says he was at your house. Yes, he was. We had hot chocolate and talked. He lied to me about where he was going. Her accusation was implicit. Your influence is corrupting my son. I told him not to do that again, I said calmly. He's welcome to visit me anytime, but he should be honest with you about it. She made a sound of frustration. That's not the point, Mom. The point is that you're driving a wedge in this family. First Olivia, now Jake. I'm not driving anything, Stephanie. I'm just living my life. If the kids want to be part of that, I'm happy to welcome them. You're undermining me, she insisted, turning them against me. Is that really what you think? That I'm engaged in some kind of revenge plot against you? There was a pause, then a sigh. I don't know what to think anymore. Everything's falling apart, and you don't even seem to care. I heard the crack in her voice, the pain beneath the anger. My daughter was hurting, confused, feeling abandoned perhaps. Despite everything, my heart ached for her. I do care, Stephanie. I care about you, about Jake and Emma, about our family. But caring doesn't mean surrendering my autonomy or accepting disrespect. Disrespect? She sounded genuinely bewildered. Is that what you think I've been doing? Disrespecting you? Yes, I said simply. Not intentionally, perhaps, but yes. When you make decisions for me without consulting me, when you talk over me, when you treat me like I'm incapable or burdensome, that's disrespect. Silence stretched between us, heavy with unspoken words and unexamined assumptions. Finally, Stephanie spoke, her voice smaller than before. I never meant to make you feel that way. I know, I said gently, but intention and impact are different things. Another pause. Then, so, what now? Where do we go from here? It was the first time she'd asked rather than told. The first sign that perhaps she was beginning to see me as a person with agency rather than a problem to be managed. It felt like the smallest of victories, but a significant one. I don't know exactly, I admitted, but I think it starts with accepting that I'm going to live here in my own house, making my own decisions. And that doesn't mean I don't love you or appreciate your concern. It just means I need to be treated as an equal, not a dependent. And the will? The accounts? The practical Stephanie always circling back to logistics. Those changes stand, I said firmly, not as punishment, but as my choice about my assets. I've made provisions for Jake and Emma's education, but the rest goes to Olivia. I expected an argument, but instead heard only a soft exhale. I see. Stephanie. I, I should go, she interrupted. Jake needs help with his homework, and dinner's almost ready, and I just need to process all this. Of course. She hung up without saying goodbye, leaving me with the uncertain feeling that something had shifted between us, not healed, not yet, but perhaps beginning to bend toward a new understanding. I placed the phone on the table and went to the living room window, looking out at the darkening street. Winter was settling in earnest now, the bare branches of the maple trees etched against the twilight sky like black lace. Soon there would be snow, then the slow thaw of spring, the cycle continuing as it always had. Life moved forward, whether we were ready or not. Relationships evolved, sometimes painfully, but beneath it all was the constant opportunity to grow, to learn, to become more fully ourselves with each passing day. At 75, I was finally embracing that opportunity again, and perhaps, in her own way and time, Stephanie would too. The weeks passed, winter deepening around my little house. I fell into new routines. Morning walks when the weather permitted, afternoon reading in my favorite chair, evenings spent trying recipes I'd always wanted to make, but Stephanie had deemed too spicy or rich or complicated for my delicate system. Olivia visited several times a week, often bringing groceries or books or simply her bright presence. Jake came every Saturday afternoon, gradually opening up about his photography, his anxieties, his complicated relationship with his mother. Even Emma, my 13-year-old granddaughter, had started visiting, though always with Jake, never alone, a concession to Stephanie's lingering unease, I suspected. Through it all, Stephanie maintained a cool distance. Our conversations, when they happened, were brief and practical. Updates about the children, questions about my health, occasional awkward invitations to family dinners that I sometimes accepted, sometimes declined, exercising my newfound freedom to choose. I tried not to push, to give her the space to adjust to our new reality. But as Christmas approached, the distance began to feel more painful, a persistent ache beneath the holiday preparation. You should call her, Olivia suggested one afternoon as we decorated my small artificial tree, another item Stephanie had deemed unnecessary when I moved in with her family. Invite her for coffee or something. I've tried, I said, hanging a delicate glass ornament. Robert and I had bought on our 30th anniversary. She always has an excuse. She's stubborn, Olivia said, untangling a string of lights, like someone else I know. I smiled despite myself. It runs in the family, I'm afraid. Mom used to say that the Wilson women could outweigh a stone. She paused, a wistful look crossing her face. I miss her this time of year, especially. Me too, sweetheart. I touched her cheek gently. She loved Christmas. We worked in companionable silence for a while, each lost in memories of Sarah, her laugh, her thoughtful gifts, the way she made even small moments feel special. You know, Olivia said finally, Mom would have hated seeing you and Aunt Stephanie at odds like this. She was always the peacemaker. She was, I agreed, always finding the middle ground, the compromise. Maybe that's the answer, Olivia suggested. Not giving in, but finding a compromise, something to bridge the gap. I considered her words as I placed the old star topper on the tree. Sarah had always been able to see both sides, to find the path forward when others could only see obstacles. What would she have suggested in this situation? The answer came to me later that night as I was sorting through old Christmas cards, many of them handmade by the children when they were young. One in particular caught my eye, a construction paper creation from Stephanie, maybe age 8 or 9. To Mom and Dad, it read in careful lettering, "Thank you for teaching me to be brave. Brave." The word lingered in my mind. Stephanie had been a timid child, afraid of the dark, of new places, of change in any form. Robert and I had worked hard to help her find her courage, to face her fears rather than avoid them. When had that lesson twisted into rigid control, into the illusion that if she managed everything perfectly, nothing bad could happen? Perhaps that was the key, not just asserting my independence, but helping Stephanie find her way back to that braver version of herself, the one who could face uncertainty without needing to control everything and everyone around her. The next morning, I made a decision. Instead of waiting for Stephanie to come around, I would make one more attempt to reach her, not with accusations or demands, but with an invitation, a chance to start again. I dialed her number before I could talk myself out of it. "Hello?" Her voice was guarded, as it always was now when she saw my name on her caller ID. "Stephanie, I was wondering if you might have time for lunch today. Just the two of us." A pause. Why? The directness of the question threw me momentarily. "Because you're my daughter, and I miss you." Another pause. Longer this time. Then, with a sigh that seemed to carry weeks of tension, "Where did you want to meet?" We agreed on a small cafe downtown, neutral territory for both of us. When I arrived, Stephanie was already there, seated at a corner table, her back straight, her expression carefully composed. She wore the pearl earrings I'd given her for her 30th birthday, a small detail that gave me hope. "Thank you for coming," I said, sliding into the seat across from her. She nodded stiffly. "You're looking well. So are you, though a bit tired, perhaps?" A flicker of surprise crossed her face at my observation. "It's been a busy season at work. End of year accounting always is." We ordered soup and salad for her, a chicken sandwich for me, and then fell into an awkward silence. I hadn't planned exactly what to say, hoping the right words would come in the moment. Now I found myself struggling to bridge the chasm between us. Finally, Stephanie spoke. "Jake told me you're helping him build a portfolio for photography school applications." Her tone was neutral, giving nothing away. "Yes, he's very talented. I found some old equipment of your father's in the attic. A light meter, some filters." Jake was thrilled. "He wants to major in fine arts." There was a hint of disapproval in her voice. I'd been trying to steer him toward business, or at least something more practical. "He has a gift, Stephanie. An eye for composition that can't be taught." She frowned slightly. "Gifts don't pay bills." "Not always directly," I agreed, "but passion often leads to success. And isn't happiness worth something too?" Our food arrived, giving us both a moment to regroup. I watched as Stephanie methodically arranged her salad, moving the tomatoes to one side, just as she'd done since childhood. "Some habits never change." "I didn't ask you to lunch to argue about Jake's future," I said gently. She looked up. "Then why did you?" I took a breath. "Because I miss my daughter. Because despite everything that's happened, I love you. And because I think there might be a way forward for us that doesn't require either of us to surrender who we are." Something flickered in her eyes. Uncertainty, perhaps hope. "What does that mean exactly?" "It means I'm not coming back to live with you. I need my independence, my own space. But that doesn't mean we can't still be family, still support each other, still love each other." She poked at her salad. You've changed everything, Mom. The accounts, the will, the power of attorney. Yes, I interrupted gently. Those changes were necessary for me to feel secure, to know that my choices would be respected. But they don't change the fact that you're my daughter, that I'm proud of you, that I want you in my life. As what? If I'm not taking care of you anymore, then what am I supposed to be? The question stunned me with its raw honesty. In those few words, Stephanie had revealed the heart of the matter. Her identity, her sense of purpose in relation to me, had become entirely wrapped up in being my caretaker, my manager. Without that role, she didn't know how to be my daughter. Just be Stephanie, I said softly. The bright, capable woman I've always loved. My daughter, not my keeper. We can have a relationship based on mutual respect, rather than dependence. She looked skeptical. That sounds nice in theory, but what does it look like in practice? Do I just call you for chat? Stop by for coffee? Why not? That's what most adult children do with their parents. But what if you need help? What if something happens? I smiled. Then I'll ask for help. The difference is that I'll be asking, not having it imposed on me. She fell silent, pushing a cherry tomato around her plate. I waited, giving her time to process. I was so scared when Dad died, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. You seemed so lost. I didn't want to lose you too. Oh, Stephanie. I reached across the table, covering her hand with mine. I was grieving. Yes, but I wasn't lost. I was finding my way, just as I'm doing now. Tears welled in her eyes. I thought I was helping. I really did. I know, I squeezed her hand. And in many ways, you were. But somewhere along the way, helping turned into controlling, and I disappeared under all your good intentions. She nodded slowly, a tear slipping down her cheek. I'm not sure I know how to do this differently. We'll figure it out together, I promised. One day at a time. We finished our lunch, the conversation shifting to lighter topics. Emma's science project, an amusing story about Alan's attempt to install new kitchen cabinets, my adventures with a leaky faucet that 3 YouTube tutorials and 1 call to a plumber later was finally fixed. When we parted outside the cafe, Stephanie hesitated, then stepped forward to hug me. A real hug, not the perfunctory embrace she'd been offering since our rift began. I'm trying to understand, Mom, she whispered against my hair. I really am. I know, sweetheart. That's all I ask. As I watched her walk to her car, I felt a lightness in my chest. Not the complete resolution I might have hoped for, but a beginning, a crack in the wall between us, letting in just enough light to find our way back to each other. The path ahead wouldn't be smooth or straight. Stephanie's need for control was deeply ingrained, as was my newfound determination to maintain my independence. We would stumble, disagree, perhaps even hurt each other again, but we would do so as 2 adult women finding a new way to be mother and daughter, not as keeper and kept. And that, I decided as I turned toward my own car, was progress worth celebrating. Christmas Eve brought snow, big lazy flakes that transformed the world into a postcard scene. I spent the morning baking cookies for the neighbors, a pumpkin bread for Olivia, and my signature apple pie for the family dinner at Stephanie's that evening. I'd accepted her invitation with only mild trepidation, hopeful that our lunch conversation had begun a thaw in our relationship. Olivia arrived mid-afternoon to drive me to Stephanie's, refusing to let me navigate the snowy roads myself. You look festive, she commented as I emerged in a red sweater I hadn't worn in years, a small silver snowflake pin at the collar. I feel festive, I admitted. Nervous too, but mostly hopeful. The drive to Stephanie's was filled with Olivia's chatter about her final exams, her plans for the winter break, her excitement about a summer internship she'd applied for. I listened, marveling at the confident young woman my granddaughter had become, so like Sarah in her enthusiasm, but with a practical streak that reminded me of Stephanie. When we arrived, Jake met us at the door, taking the pie from my hands with a grin. Grandma, Merry Christmas. His voice cracked on Christmas, a reminder that he was straddling that awkward space between boy and man. Inside, the house was transformed. Garlands draped the staircase, lights twinkled from every surface, and the familiar scent of cinnamon and pine filled the air. For 3 years, I'd helped create this holiday magic, always following Stephanie's precise instructions. Now I could appreciate it simply as a guest. Emma bounded forward, throwing her arms around me. Grandma, I made you something. Did you now? I hugged her back, breathing in the scent of strawberry shampoo. She pulled away, digging in her pocket to produce a small tissue-wrapped package. It's for your tree. Inside was a hand-painted ceramic ornament, a whimsical pie with a tiny fork beside it. I laughed in delight. It's perfect. Jake helped me with the idea, she admitted. Do you really like it? I love it. It's going in the center of my tree as soon as I get home. Ellen appeared from the kitchen, nodding a greeting. Martha, good to see you. Can I get you some wine? That would be lovely, thank you. Stephanie was the last to appear, emerging from the dining room with a slightly harried expression that softened when she saw me. Mom, you're here? And Olivia? Wonderful. She smoothed her apron. Dinner's almost ready. Just putting the finishing touches on the gravy. Can I help? I offered. An old reflex. She hesitated, then nodded. Actually, yes. The rolls need to come out of the oven. In the kitchen, we moved around each other with the familiar choreography of women who have cooked together for years. I removed the golden rolls while Stephanie stirred the gravy. Olivia set out serving dishes, asking questions about ingredients, timing, techniques, things I realized Stephanie and I had never bothered to teach her. You should come over sometime, I told her. I'll show you how to make your grandfather's famous bread pudding. I'd like that, she said, shooting a quick glance at Stephanie as if gauging her reaction. To my surprise, Stephanie nodded. You should. Mom's the better baker between us. Always has been. The small acknowledgement that I had skills, knowledge, value beyond being an elderly charge warmed me more than the busy kitchen. Dinner was a lively affair. Jake regaled us with stories from his photography club. Emma debated the merits of various fantasy novels with Olivia, and Alan, loosened by wine, shared amusing anecdotes from his law practice. Stephanie was quieter than usual, but her smile seemed genuine, her tension gradually easing as the meal progressed. After dessert, both my apple pie and Stephanie's chocolate torte served side by side without comment about dietary concerns or appropriate portions. We gathered in the living room for the family gift exchange. I'd kept my gifts simple this year: a high-quality camera filter for Jake, a set of illustrated classics for Emma, a cashmere scarf for Stephanie, cufflinks for Alan, and for Olivia, a small jewelry box that had belonged to Sarah, containing her favorite earrings. Mom wore these at my kindergarten graduation, Olivia said softly, touching the pearl studs with reverent fingers. I remember because she let me try them on afterward, and I felt so grown up. She'd want you to have them, I said, my throat tight with emotion. Stephanie watched this exchange with an unreadable expression. When it was her turn, she handed me a small, heavy package, wrapped in silver paper. Inside was a key, not a symbolic key, but an actual functional house key on a silver chain. It's to our house, she explained, her voice carefully neutral, so you can come and go as you please. No expectations, no pressure, just always welcome. I closed my fingers around the key, understanding the gesture for what it was, not an attempt to reclaim control, but an offer of connection on new terms, a door that remained open, but that I could choose to walk through or not. Thank you, I said simply, meeting her eyes. It means a lot. The evening wound down slowly, comfortably. As Olivia helped me with my coat, Stephanie approached, her expression hesitant. I was thinking, she said, maybe we could have lunch again next week. Just to talk. No agenda. I'd like that, I replied, my heart lifting at this small olive branch. She nodded, then surprised me by leaning in for another hug, briefer than the one outside the cafe, but no less genuine. Merry Christmas, Mom. Merry Christmas, Stephanie. As Olivia drove me home through the snowy streets, I held the key in my palm, feeling its weight, its significance. Not a surrender of my independence, but an acknowledgement of our enduring connection despite everything that had changed. Good night? Olivia asked, glancing at me. Better than I expected, I admitted. It feels like a beginning. At home, I placed Emma's pie ornament in the center of my tree, just as promised. Then I hung Stephanie's key on a hook by the door, not hidden away, not forgotten, but present. A reminder that family connections, even when strained, even when redefined, remained one of life's most precious gifts. As winter gave way to early spring, my life settled into rhythms both old and new. I tended my house, planted seeds in small pots on the kitchen windowsill, and rediscovered hobbies long set aside: watercolor painting, jigsaw puzzles, the mystery novels Stephanie had deemed too stimulating for bedtime reading. My relationship with Stephanie continued its cautious thaw. Our weekly lunches became a fixture, sometimes tense, sometimes warm, but always honest. We were learning to know each other again, not as caretaker in charge, but as mother and daughter, two adult women with separate lives that nonetheless remained connected. Jake visited regularly, his confidence growing as his photography skills developed. Emma came too, usually with Stephanie, but occasionally on her own, as her mother's protective instincts gradually relaxed, and Olivia remained my most frequent visitor, often bringing groceries or simply her bright presence to fill my quiet rooms. One crisp March afternoon, as Olivia and I sat on the back porch watching the first crocuses push through the soil, she asked a question that caught me off guard. Are you happy, Grandma, with how things turned out? I considered the question carefully, watching a robin hop across the patchy lawn. Yes, I said finally, not because everything is perfect, it isn't, but because I'm living authentically again, making my own choices, good or bad. She nodded thoughtfully. Mom would be proud of you. Sarah? The mention of my younger daughter still brought a bittersweet ache. She always said you were the strongest person she knew, that you taught her what dignity looked like. Olivia smiled softly. I didn't really understand what she meant until I watched you these past few months. I reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. Your mother was the wise one. She understood people in ways I'm still learning. Maybe, Olivia conceded, but you're the one who stood up at 75 and said enough. That takes a different kind of wisdom. We sat in companionable silence after that, watching the yard slowly wake from winter's sleep. The metaphor wasn't lost on me. How life, like the seasons, moved in cycles of dormancy and renewal. How even after the deepest freeze, green shoots found their way toward light. That evening, after Olivia left, I made myself a simple dinner: a small salad, a piece of broiled fish, a glass of white wine. I ate at the kitchen table with a proper place setting, as I always did now, refusing to fall into the habit of rushed meals, standing at the counter or absent-minded eating in front of the television. As I washed my single plate, single glass, single fork, I thought about Stephanie's most recent visit. She'd brought a houseplant to brighten the place up, she'd said, and had managed to leave without rearranging my furniture or commenting on the dust under the bookshelf. Small victories, but meaningful ones. The phone rang as I was drying my hands. Stephanie's number. Mom? Her voice had an unfamiliar urgency. Are you busy right now? No, just finished dinner. Is everything okay? She hesitated. I need to talk to you about something. In person. Could I come over? 20 minutes later, she was at my door, her hair windblown, her expression troubled. I ushered her in, concern mounting at her unusual agitation. What's wrong, Stephanie? Is it the kids? Alan? No, no, nothing like that. She paced my small living room, reminding me again of her teenage self. I found something. When I was cleaning out the filing cabinet, she pulled a folder from her bag, placing it on the coffee table between us. It's about Sarah. I sat down slowly. What about Sarah? Stephanie joined me on the couch, opening the folder. Inside were medical reports, insurance forms, and a letter in Sarah's handwriting, addressed to Stephanie, but never sent. She knew, Stephanie said, her voice breaking. She knew the cancer was back, months before she told any of us. She went through the first treatments alone, Stephanie, alone. I stared at the documents, dates swimming before my eyes. 3 months. Sarah had known for 3 months before she'd gathered us in her living room. Olivia tucked against her side and told us the cancer had returned, more aggressive than before. Why would she keep this from us? I whispered. Stephanie handed me the letter with trembling fingers. Read it. Sarah's familiar handwriting blurred through my tears as I read. Steph, by the time you find this, I'll have already told you and Mom about the cancer. I'm sorry for keeping it from you these past months. I needed time to process, to plan to be Sarah instead of cancer patient for just a little longer. Mom took Dad's death so hard, and you've been under so much pressure with work and the kids. I couldn't bear to add to that burden until I absolutely had to. Please don't be angry. This was my choice, my way of protecting myself and all of you for as long as possible. Take care of Olivia and Mom when I'm gone. But Steph, and this is important, let them take care of themselves too. Let them be who they are, not who you think they should be. That's the greatest gift you can give anyone. Love, Sarah. I lowered the letter, my hands shaking. Oh, Sarah. Stephanie was crying openly now. I didn't listen. She told me exactly what to do, and I did the opposite. I didn't let either of you be yourselves. I tried to control everything, fix everything. You were grieving, I said gently. We all were. That's no excuse. She wiped her eyes roughly. I've been so angry these past months. At you for asserting your independence, at Olivia for supporting you, even at Jake for his photography. I've been trying to control everything and everyone, thinking I was protecting you all. Just like I thought I was protecting Sarah by taking over after her diagnosis. I reached for her hand. Stephanie. No, let me finish. She took a deep breath. I've been seeing a therapist since January. She's been helping me understand why I need to control things so badly. Why I can't just let people be. I blinked in surprise. Stephanie, practical, no nonsense Stephanie, seeing a therapist? That's wonderful. It's hard, she admitted. Really hard. But finding this letter, it was like Sarah was speaking to me directly across all these years. And she was right. About everything. She looked up. Her eyes red but clear. I'm sorry, Mom. For not respecting your autonomy. For treating you like a problem to solve, instead of a person to love. For not listening when you tried to tell me how you felt. The apology, so long awaited, washed over me like a cleansing rain. Not because I needed Stephanie to admit she was wrong, but because her recognition of what had happened between us opened the door to genuine healing. I forgive you, I said simply. And I hope you can forgive me too, for not being more direct about how I was feeling until it reached a breaking point. She nodded, a small smile breaking through her tears. We're quite a pair, aren't we? Too stubborn for our own good. The Wilson women. I agreed. Remembering Olivia's comment about outwadding stones, we sat together for a long time. The letter between us, Sarah's presence almost palpable in the quiet room. Not with sadness or regret, but with a sense of completion, of a circle finally closing. What happens now? Stephanie asked eventually. Now, I said, we keep going, learning to be mother and daughter in a new way, honoring Sarah by doing what she asked, letting each other be who we are. I'd like that, she said softly. I really would. As Stephanie left that night, she hugged me tightly, a real embrace without hesitation or reservation. I love you, Mom, she whispered. Just as you are. I love you too, Stephanie, I replied, exactly as you are. I stood at the door long after her car disappeared down the street, feeling a sense of peace that had eluded me for years. Not because everything was fixed or perfect, but because we were finally facing each other honestly, without the masks of caretaker and charge that had distorted our relationship for so long. Inside, I made myself a cup of tea and carried it to the living room. The letter from Sarah lay on the coffee table where Stephanie had left it, a gift neither of us had known we needed. I touched the paper gently, tracing my daughter's words with my fingertip. Thank you, I whispered to Sarah, to the universe, to whatever force had brought this message to us at exactly the right moment. Outside, a spring rain began to fall, washing away the last traces of winter, preparing the earth for new growth. I sipped my tea and listened to the gentle patter against the windows of my house where I lived on my own terms, surrounded by memories but not imprisoned by them, connected to my family but not defined by them. At 75, I had walked out of my daughter's house with a Thanksgiving pie, an act of quiet rebellion that had led me back to myself. The journey hadn't been easy. There had been pain, confusion, anger, and grief along the way. But there had also been discovery, renewal, and a kind of liberation I hadn't known I was missing. Stephanie was right. We were quite a pair, too stubborn for our own good. But in our stubbornness, we had finally found our way to a truth Sarah had understood all along, that love without respect isn't really love at all, that the greatest gift we can give anyone is the freedom to be fully themselves. I set my empty teacup on the side table and looked around my small living room at the photographs on the mantel, the books on the shelves, the watercolor I'd recently finished hanging proudly on the wall. Each item a choice, a reflection of who I was rather than who someone else thought I should be. This was what I had reclaimed when I walked out with that roast. Not just my independence, not just my dignity, but my very self, the woman who had been slowly disappearing, one small dismissal at a time. She was back now, older and perhaps wiser, with silver hair and creaking knees, but also with clear eyes and a voice that remembered how to speak its truth. Not perfect, not without fears or doubts, but authentic. Mine. And that, I decided as I rose to prepare for bed, was the most precious possession of all.